I didn't go to the bank expecting anything unusual. I just needed to take out $100, groceries, a little cash for the Sunday offering, and a refill on my arthritis cream. It was the same branch I'd been using since they built it in '97, just across from the old laundromat. I smiled at the young teller behind the glass, handed her my card and ID like always. She smiled back politely, but the moment she looked at her screen, I knew something was wrong. Her face went stiff just for a second. Then she tried to smooth it out with that customer service smile. "Just a moment, Miss Bannister. Let me check something." She stepped away and walked to the back. A few minutes later, Elise, the branch manager, came out. I knew her. Early 30s, pressed suits, polite voice. She'd helped me once when I misplaced my debit card. She smiled gently, like she was approaching bad news with a sugar coat. "Miss Bannister, would you mind stepping into my office?" she asked. That was all it took to put the weight of the world on my chest. We sat in her little glass cubicle, the one with the fern in the corner and the chair that always squeaked. She laid a printed statement in front of me and pointed to the number at the bottom. "Your available balance is $38.12. I blinked. That can't be right." She nodded, gentle-like. "That's what I thought, so I double-checked. But it appears there were several large transfers over the past few months. All to the same account, JR Holdings LLC. I didn't say anything for a long time. My eyes drifted down the list. The numbers blurred together. $5,000, $12,500, $18,700. One after another, all labeled the same way. "I don't know what that is," I said. My voice was small in my own ears. "I don't have a business." She offered me a soft smile, the kind they give you when they don't know what else to do. Told me to speak to a financial advisor. Told me the bank would cooperate if I needed to report fraud. I nodded, thanked her, and walked out like a woman floating in her own skin. When I got home, I didn't take off my shoes. I walked straight to the kitchen table and sat down. My house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that hums in your ears and makes you feel smaller than the furniture around you. I spread the statement on the table and stared at it. My hands trembled. My stomach twisted. I'd saved that money my whole life. 36 years in the school cafeteria, up at 5 a.m. every day, cooking biscuits and mopping floors. I missed birthdays. Skipped doctor's appointments. I worked while other folks retired. Every dollar in that pension came from sweat and sacrifice. I thought of my son, Jallen Rivers. My only child. He'd always been sharp, always dressed nice, always had a slick answer. Lately, he'd been talking a lot about investments in real estate. Driving a new car, wearing shoes that cost more than my light bill. I figured maybe he'd finally hit his stride. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mama. Everything all right?" "I went to the bank today," I said, keeping my voice calm. "My account is nearly empty." There was a pause. Too long. Then he laughed like it was nothing. "Oh, that. Yeah, it's just some business stuff. I moved some of your funds into a better account. It's all safe." "What business stuff?" I asked. "You didn't tell me anything about that." "We talked about this a few months ago, Mama," he said. "You told me to handle things for you. Remember? I set up a holding account." "No, Jallen. I never said that. I never gave you permission." "You probably just forgot," he said, and his voice had a little edge now. "I had you sign the papers. It's handled." I couldn't speak for a second. My breath caught in my chest. "I want to see the papers," I said. "I'll show you, Mama. Don't worry. Still your money. It's just working for you now." He hung up after that. I sat at the table for a long time. The sun moved across the window and the kitchen grew dim, but I didn't move. I looked up at the picture of him on the fridge. 5 years old, missing front teeth, grinning from ear to ear. I remembered when I scraped together enough to buy him that graduation cap. I remembered frying chicken at 2 different houses just to afford his school shoes. I picked up the phone again and called Tarek. Tarek Ellison is my nephew, my sister Gloria's boy. He's 29, works with computers, always respectful. Still brings me lemon cake on my birthday and calls me Aunt D. He's got one of those quiet, serious brains. Doesn't talk a lot, but when he does, it's worth listening to. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Aunt D." "Tarek," I said, "I think I need your help. Something's not right with my money." He came the next morning. Brought his laptop, gave me a hug and didn't waste time with small talk. I told him everything while he logged into my email and bank account. After a while he stopped clicking. "Did you sign this?" he asked. I leaned over. It was a scan power of attorney form. My name, my signature. Only thought. The date was wrong. The layout wasn't familiar. I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "That's not mine." "It was submitted 2 months ago," he said. "And Jallen created a business account, JR Holdings. He listed you as a silent investor." "A silent what?" "Basically, it gave him permission to move your money without telling you." I stared at the screen. At the neat little lie that cost me everything. "I never told him to do that," I said. "Not ever." Tarek closed the laptop gently. "We need to do something, Aunt D." I looked down at my hands, still trembling. "He's my son." "I know," he said. "But that doesn't make it right." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and watched the streetlights flicker through the blinds. I thought about every meal I skipped, every time I bit my tongue. I thought about what kind of mother raises a son who could do this. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was past crying. In the morning, I would make a call that I never thought I'd have to make. But that night, I just whispered one thing to myself. Not again. Tarek came by again the next morning, earlier than I expected. I hadn't even put my hair up yet. He brought his laptop, a folder of printed screenshots, and 2 blueberry muffins in a brown paper bag. Said he picked them up from that bakery near 47th because he knew I liked them soft in the middle. That boy always was thoughtful. He sat at my kitchen table and walked me through what he'd found. He showed me the email I supposedly sent Jallen with a scan power of attorney attached. My name was on it, my signature too, but the shape of the D was off and the R in Bannister didn't curl the way I always wrote it. I knew right away it wasn't mine. "I never signed this," I said, shaking my head. "That's not my signature. That's not even how I write." Tarek nodded. "I figured. And look here, he used this to register you as a silent investor in his company. JR Holdings. He linked it to your pension account. The bank assumed everything was authorized." I felt sick. I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders and leaned back in the chair. I told him to help me with groceries. Not wipe out my whole future. "I know," he said quietly. "But the paper trail says otherwise. And that's what matters in court." I looked at him confused. "Court? We need to get a lawyer, Aunt D," he said gently. "This is serious. He stole over $100,000. This isn't just a misunderstanding. It's a crime." I didn't say anything for a while. My throat was dry. The idea of taking my son to court made me feel hollow inside. But I also knew I couldn't let this go. I had to at least talk to him again. I had to give him a chance to explain himself or maybe fix it. So I called Jallen and invited him over for dinner that Sunday. I didn't tell him what it was about. I just said I was cooking his favorite: roast chicken, collard greens, candied yams, and sweet tea. I wanted it to feel warm, familiar. I wanted to believe that maybe the boy I raised was still somewhere inside that man. He arrived a little after 6 with Janice in tow. Janice Rivers, his wife of 8 years, always dressed like she was on her way to a photo shoot. White blouse, gold watch, hair curled perfect at the ends. She smiled when she hugged me and told me the house smelled like home. I forced a smile and welcomed them in. We ate in the dining room. I'd set the table with real napkins and the glass dishes I usually saved for Thanksgiving. Jallen talked about a new development he was bidding on, and Janice talked about her interior design blog getting sponsored. They laughed. They complimented the chicken. But I couldn't focus on any of it. I waited until the plates were cleared and we were sipping tea before I said what I came to say. "Jallen," I began, keeping my tone gentle, "I went to the bank last week. They said someone moved over $100,000 out of my account. All of it went to something called JR Holdings." He blinked, then sat back in his chair. "Right. That's the investment account. We talked about that." "No, we didn't," I said. "I never agreed to that. I never signed anything." Janice reached out and placed her hand over mine. "Miss D, you mentioned a while ago you were feeling overwhelmed with bills and passwords and all that. You said maybe Jallen could help take over some of the financial stuff. Maybe that's when it got started." I pulled my hand back slowly. I said he could help me with groceries. With errands. Not this. Jalen's voice took on that edge I remembered from when he was a teenager and didn't want to be told what to do. "Mama, you signed the papers." "I have them." You just don't remember. I remember what I sign, I said sharper now. And I remember telling you that money was for emergencies, not some LLC with a name I never heard of. Janice stayed quiet. Her smile was gone. Then Tarek, who had been sitting quietly on the far end of the table, finally spoke up. She didn't sign those papers, Jallen. That signature was forged. You committed fraud. Jallen turned to him like a switch flipped. This has nothing to do with you, Tarek. You're not family. She's my aunt, Tarek said, calm but firm. That makes it my business. You're just an outsider running his mouth. Stay in your lane. I stood up. That's enough. Both of you. My voice was shaking. My hands too. I looked straight at my son. Jallen, I raised you better than this. I broke my back working to save that money. I went without. I skipped meals so you could eat. I pawned my wedding ring to buy you a graduation suit. And you took everything I saved like it was owed to you. Mama, he said, rolling his eyes, you're acting like I stole it. I'm investing it. You'll see it grow. I started to cry. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help it. The tears came fast and full, my shoulders shaking. Please, baby. Just give it back. We don't need to do all this. You can fix it. We can make it right. He looked at me and something cold passed across his face. You can't even walk up the stairs anymore, he said. What do you need that kind of money for? Janice's eyes widened, but she said nothing. I covered my mouth, stunned. Tarek stood, stepping between us. That's your mother, man. What is wrong with you? Shut up, Jallen snapped. You don't know what this family needs. You don't know what I've been carrying. No, I said, trembling. You don't get to say that. I carried you. For 9 months. And then for 44 years after that. Everything you are, I paid for. He grabbed his coat and walked out. Janice followed, avoiding my eyes. They didn't even finish the tea. After the door closed, I sat back down. Tarek stood in the doorway watching me cry. I didn't want to believe he'd talk to me like that, I whispered. Tarek's voice was low. You gave him every chance, Aunt D. Now we need to fight back. I didn't respond right away. My hands were shaking too badly to hold the tea glass. We need to take this to court, Tarek said again, firmer this time. Before he does worse. I closed my eyes and nodded once, slowly. Find me a lawyer. I didn't sleep much that night. After Jallen walked out and Janice right behind him like a ghost, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, listening to the hum of the fridge and the creak of the old house settling. I kept hearing his voice in my head. What do you need that kind of money for? The boy I carried in my body, fed from my own hands, now looked at me like I was a burden. Like I'd lived too long. The next morning, Tarek made a few calls. He said there was someone I should talk to, someone who handles cases like this. Her name was Nova Perryman, an elder law attorney in town who left corporate law after her own aunt got scammed by her caregiver. Tarek said she didn't take on many cases, but when she did, she fought like hell. Nova came to my house that Thursday afternoon. I'd made sweet tea and wiped down the table 3 times before she even knocked. She walked in wearing slacks and a leather bag slung across her chest, eyes sharp but warm. She sat down, pulled out a legal pad and asked me to tell her everything. I walked her through the bank visit. The forged signature. The business name I never knew. My son's reaction. The way he spoke to me. I told her I'd begged him to stop. That I cried in front of him and he looked through me like I was already gone. Nova nodded slowly, taking notes with one hand. Do you have the original power of attorney from before? I opened the drawer near the fridge and pulled it out. I'd filed it away back when I thought I could still trust Jallen to do the right thing. It was dated 3 years ago. We'd revoked it together after a disagreement about some stock advice he gave me that went sideways. Nova compared it to the new one Tarek had found. The dates didn't match. The formatting didn't match. And worst of all, my signature looked pasted in. This was submitted after the revocation, Nova said, pointing at the screen. This is identity theft. He used a forged POA to establish authority, then opened a business account in your name without your consent. That's elder financial abuse, wire fraud and misappropriation of funds. I sat there quiet. I didn't need the legal words to understand what had been done to me. My bones already knew it. My chest already knew it. Nova asked if I wanted to file a formal complaint and begin proceedings. I hesitated. But he's my son. Nova set down her pen and looked at me straight. And you're his mother. You gave him life. He gave you betrayal. That doesn't make you the one who needs to apologize. I looked over at Tarek, who hadn't said a word since Nova walked in. His jaw was tight, his eyes steady. He was waiting to see if I would let it happen again. If I would let it slide like too many mothers do, thinking love means letting it go. I don't want him to go to jail, I whispered. You want your life back? Nova asked. I nodded. Then let the court decide how far this needs to go. Your job is to tell the truth. That's all. I closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them, my voice came out quieter than I expected. Do it. We filed the police report the next day. Nova handled everything. I signed the paperwork with a pen that didn't tremble, even though my hands wanted to. She said we had more than enough to subpoena his bank records, tie the forged documents to his IP address, and prove deliberate theft. She said judges don't take kindly to children bleeding their parents dry under the disguise of family. 2 weeks passed in silence. Then one afternoon there was a knock at the door. I opened it and there he was. His shoulders were tense, lips curled in disgust. He had a folded envelope in one hand and fury in his eyes. I could see the edges of the subpoena sticking out. You really called the police on me? He spat. On your own son? I didn't move from the doorway. You left me with $38, Jallen. He stepped inside without being asked. Tarek was in the living room and stood up quick, but I motioned for him to stay back. I told you I was handling things, Jallen said. You've embarrassed me in front of my wife, my partners. You stole from me, I interrupted. You forged my signature. You used my name to fund some fake company. It's not fake, he shouted. It's a real business. I'm building something. For us. No, I said. You built it for you. You drained my pension. You looked me in the eye while I begged you and you kept going. He sneered. You don't even know how the world works. You think scrubbing cafeteria trays for 30 years makes you an expert on investments. I know enough to know what you did is wrong. Tarek stepped forward. You need to leave, man. Jallen turned on him like a viper. You don't speak to me. You're not even real family. She's more family to me than you are, Tarek said. You betrayed her. Jallen looked back at me, breathing hard. Do what you gotta do, old lady. You're already halfway in the grave anyway. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just stepped back and closed the door in his face. He didn't knock again. That night I sat in my living room with Tarek and Nova, a cup of tea in my hand and my name back in my mouth. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't confused. I was angry. I was hurt. But most of all I was ready. Nova said the next step was court. And this time I'd be the one walking in with the truth on my side. The courthouse smelled like lemon polish and cold paper. The kind of place where people whisper even when there's nothing to hide. I sat in the front row of the courtroom, my palms resting on my lap, my back straight no matter how much it ached. I wore my husband's funeral brooch on my jacket. Not because it matched, but because I needed something strong pinned to me that day. Tarek sat on my right, quiet as always but protective in the way I didn't have the words to thank him for. Nova Perryman, my attorney, sat on my left, flipping calmly through her files with the focus of a woman who had been preparing for this moment her whole career. We'd submitted everything. Bank records, IP traces, the revoked power of attorney, even the email headers. Nova said we had enough evidence to make the courtroom fall silent. And then Jallen walked in. He wore a charcoal gray suit neatly pressed with a silver tie I'd never seen before. Janice followed behind him like a shadow. She had on pearls and her hair was perfect, but her face looked tight. She avoided my eyes when she passed, sitting beside him without a word. Jallen looked straight ahead like this was a business meeting. He didn't glance in my direction. Not once. The bailiff called the courtroom to order. The judge walked in, His Honor Lionel Drayton. Black man, mid-60s, kind face but no nonsense in his voice. I'd looked him up. He used to be a public defender, then a family court judge. Tarek told me he had a reputation for being firm on financial crimes involving the elderly. I prayed silently he'd see through the suit and hear the truth. Tarek took the stand first. I didn't know what pride felt like in a courtroom until I saw my nephew sitting there, spine tall, voice clear, walking the court through everything he found. He showed the forged POA submission date, pointed out the IP address that traced back to Jallen's home office, and explained how the transfers were disguised as family investments. He was calm, respectful, and never raised his voice, Not even when Jallen's lawyer tried to rattle him. Next came the financial expert Nova brought in. She explained how pension funds are monitored and how the bank accepted the forged paperwork only because of the authority that came with the fraudulent POA. She confirmed I'd been wiped clean over 10 months. $132,000 gone. Most of it in chunks too large to ignore. Nova stood and presented our case like a woman holding a blade she knew exactly how to use. She walked the judge through each document, each date, and each lie. She showed a copy of the original power of attorney we had revoked and placed it side by side with the forged one. She held up my signed affidavit and read my statement aloud. Every word rang out in that room like church bells. Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Bannister, would you like to speak?" I stood slowly, heart pounding in my chest like thunder. I took the stand, swore myself in, and sat down across from the judge. He looked at me kindly, like he knew what it cost me to be there. "I worked in a school cafeteria for 36 years, I began, my voice trembling but not weak. I cleaned grease traps, scraped trays, and cooked meals for children that didn't always say thank you. I never asked for much. I never had much. But I saved. Every month. Every year. Because I wanted to grow old without having to ask anybody for help." My eyes moved to Jallen. He was still looking straight ahead. No shame. No fear. I gave my son everything I had. I skipped meals so he could eat. I went without coats so he could have new shoes. I didn't raise him with a silver spoon, but I raised him with love. And when I found out that the same child I sacrificed for had taken everything I built, I begged him to stop. I cried in front of him. I said, "Please, baby, just give it back." And he told me I didn't need it. Said I was halfway in the grave. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I took a shaky breath. I didn't come here to ruin my son's life. I came here because mine was already ruined. And I want it back. I stepped down and walked back to my seat. Tarek touched my shoulder. Nova whispered, "You did perfect." Jallen's lawyer spoke next. He tried to paint the picture of a misunderstanding. Said Jallen believed he had his mother's permission. That he intended to pay it all back. That it was family business. But the judge didn't look moved. He didn't interrupt, but he didn't take many notes either. When Jallen finally took the stand, he spoke calmly. Said I had told him to handle things. That I was getting overwhelmed with bills. That he had nothing but good intentions. He never once said the word sorry. When they asked him directly, "Did you obtain her permission in writing?" he stumbled. "Well, she signed the PO." "No," the judge interrupted. "Did she give you permission for these transfers?" Jallen's jaw clenched. It was implied. Nova stood for one final question. "Mr. Rivers, do you believe that draining your elderly mother's entire pension without clear consent was the act of a loving son?" Jallen didn't answer. The judge closed his folder and said he would deliver his ruling in the morning. As we left the courtroom, I felt heavy. Not relieved. Not yet. Just tired. Janice walked out quickly ahead of us. Tarek offered to drive me home. I nodded, my legs suddenly sore from the day's wait. That night, I sat in my living room holding the photograph of Jallen at age 6. He had missing front teeth and a Kool-Aid stain on his chin. I kissed that photo, then turned it face down on the table. Whatever came tomorrow, I knew the truth had been spoken. And I was no longer the one who needed to be ashamed. I didn't sleep the night before the sentencing. My mind kept playing everything over. The courtroom, the forged signature, Jallen's face when I begged him. I sat by the window until the sky turned gray, watching the neighborhood cats creep across the sidewalk like shadows. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was just tired. Tired in a way that reached down into my bones. Tarek picked me up that morning. He didn't say much, just opened the car door and made sure I had my walking cane. He looked like he hadn't slept either. As we drove, I kept thinking about what the judge might say. Whether Jallen would look at me. Whether he would finally feel something. We arrived early. Nova was already there, standing near the front steps of the courthouse with a file in her hand and that focused look in her eyes. She nodded at us. No speeches. No pep talks. She knew I didn't need them. Inside, the courtroom was quiet. No jury this time, just Judge Drayton behind his bench, the state prosecutor seated across from Nova, and us in the gallery. Jallen walked in 5 minutes after we were seated. Same tailored suit. Same slicked back hair. He didn't look my way. Janice wasn't with him this time. When the judge called the session to order, I felt my breath hitch. Not from fear but from the weight of what was coming. Judge Drayton cleared his throat. His voice when he spoke was low but powerful. This court has reviewed all submitted evidence regarding Mr. Jallen Rivers' unauthorized use of a revoked power of attorney to access and transfer $132,000 from the pension account of his mother, Mrs. Dolores Bannister. He paused, eyes moving from the files in front of him to Jallen's face. What we have here is not just a breach of trust. It is a calculated, sustained effort to rob an elderly parent of her financial stability under the false veil of family responsibility. Jallen shifted in his seat but still said nothing. No apology. No remorse. Mrs. Bannister, the judge said, turning his attention to me. Before I deliver sentencing, would you like to address the court? Nova looked at me. I nodded, stood slowly and made my way to the front. I looked right at the judge. Then finally I turned my eyes toward my son. I hadn't looked at him since I took the stand. I didn't come here for revenge, I said softly. I came here because I had no other choice. I raised my son on my own after my husband passed. I worked long hours in a cafeteria, skipped meals when money was tight and never once complained. I didn't have much but I always made sure he had what he needed. My voice started to shake but I didn't stop. I gave him my best years, my best love. And when he came into my house and looked me in the eyes, knowing what he had done, I still begged him to stop. I cried. I asked him not to do this. But he chose to ignore my tears. I paused, took a breath. He broke my heart. But I don't want him in prison. I just want peace. The courtroom was silent. Even Jallen looked startled for a moment. But it passed. He still didn't say a word. I returned to my seat and Judge Drayton nodded once before continuing. Mrs. Bannister, your mercy is powerful and your dignity is something this court deeply respects. However, justice does not only serve the one who was hurt. It also serves the community. And this community cannot allow crimes of this nature to go unanswered. He turned to Jallen, voice firm now. For the theft of $132,000 through fraudulent use of power of attorney, elder financial abuse and wire fraud, this court sentences you to 5 years in state prison. You are further ordered to pay full restitution to Mrs. Bannister with interest. Your business license is permanently revoked. You will not be permitted to operate under any financial or fiduciary authority for the remainder of your sentence and beyond. Jallen blinked. His face twitched slightly. But still, no words. No, I'm sorry. No, I was wrong. The bailiff asked him to stand. He did, hands behind his back as they placed cuffs on his wrists. Not tight. Not cruel. Just final. As he was led away, I saw it. The faintest moment of panic flicker across his face. Not because he was going to jail. But because for the first time someone told him no. And meant it. Outside the courtroom, Janice was waiting near the steps. She looked different. No makeup, no earrings, just plain and pale like someone who'd been crying for days. She walked up to me slowly. I didn't know it would go that far, she said. I thought he was just managing the account. I'm sorry, Miss D. Truly. I looked at her. He meant it. Maybe not from the beginning, but now, standing there without the performance, she meant it. I didn't speak right away. I just let the silence settle between us. Then I said quietly, I carried him for 9 months. Raised him for 44 years. But I couldn't stop him from destroying us. Janice nodded. She didn't argue. She just stepped back and walked away. Tarek stood beside me. He didn't say anything, just rested his hand gently on my shoulder. We drove home in silence. The courthouse disappeared behind us, but I knew the story wouldn't. I'd carry it for the rest of my life, but I wouldn't carry the shame. That belonged to him now. The first restitution check came in the mail about 4 weeks after the sentencing. It wasn't much, just a few $100s, but I stared at it for a long time before opening the envelope. It had my name printed clean across the top, Dolores A. Bannister, and it was the first thing in months that made me feel like I still owned something. I used it to repair the front porch steps. The ones Jallen used to promise he'd fix, once he closed the next deal. He said that so many times I stopped believing it was ever going to happen. But that morning I sat in a chair by the window and watched a man with thick gloves and kind eyes measure, hammer and paint over the cracks. By sundown the steps were steady again. I walked up and down them twice just to feel it in my knees. Word got around town that Jallen had filed for bankruptcy, though it didn't wipe away what he owed me. The judge made sure of that. The debt stayed. Every dollar. His credit was gone. His accounts were frozen. His reputation, well, that shattered quicker than glass under a boot heel. Janice left him within the month. Packed up her things and moved back to Atlanta to stay with her sister. She didn't tell me goodbye, but I heard from one of her cousins that she found a job at a retail shop and stopped wearing her wedding ring. I didn't feel angry about it. Just tired. I'd stopped expecting much from that household long ago. The whispers said Jallen was living in a friend's garage on the east side, sleeping on an air mattress and picking up handyman jobs under fake names to avoid wage garnishment. The man who once strutted through brunch spots talking about owning empires, now begged folks for paint jobs and yard work. And none of them were calling him back. Sometimes I imagine what he must have felt when that first cell door closed behind him. Not out of spite. Just wondering if that silence taught him anything. I never visited. He didn't write. The last thing he said to me was that I was halfway in the grave. I don't think I'll ever forget it, no matter how many sunrise teas I drink or porch breezes I breathe in. Words from your child cut sharper than any stranger's. But I also knew I couldn't carry him anymore. Not after what he did. I gave him everything I had, my body, my time, my trust, my savings. And when he took it all, I gave him one last thing he didn't ask for: accountability. One evening, I was sitting on the porch sipping tea when a little girl named Lila from 2 houses down ran past with her jump rope and waved. "Hi, Miss D," she yelled with a gap-toothed smile. "Hey, baby," I called back. I waved and smiled, then went back to watching the sunset. The light was golden, soft on the trees, and for once, my breathing didn't feel heavy. Not from grief, not from guilt. Just peace. Tarek came by later and sat beside me. He'd been checking in every week since the trial. Always brought something: a casserole, a phone charger, a slice of peach cobbler. He sat down with a sigh and looked out over the yard with me. "You think he regrets it?" he asked after a while. I didn't answer right away. I watched a bird land on the fence, then flutter off again. "Maybe one day," I said. "But regret doesn't put food on the table. And it doesn't give back what a mother gave." He nodded, didn't push me to say more. I sipped my tea and leaned back in my chair. The wind picked up a little and I let it move through me all the way down to the soles of my feet. I looked at Tarek and smiled, not because I was happy but because I was free. He looked back like he understood. "I gave him everything," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "But I kept my name. And I won't let anyone take that from me." And I meant it. My son stole my pension, so I pressed charges and watched him cry in court while I testified. My son said I didn't need that kind of money anymore. He said I was too old to use it. Too slow to manage it. And just like that, he drained every last dollar from my pension, while smiling in my face. But I didn't go quiet. I didn't die quietly either. I faced him in court. And when they asked me if I had anything to say, I looked him in the eye and told the truth. Before I begin my story, I just want to say thank you for listening to me pour my heart out. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love hearing from you. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. It helps me more than you know. Now let me tell you what really happened.